All right. Thank you, Christy. And again, I want to echo Christy's welcome. I'm Jim Jordan and my partner in crime.
I'm Dan O'Rourke. Nice to meet you all. And Christy, thank you so much. I'm a teacher at Riverside Brookfield High School, which is in the western suburbs of Chicago. I've been teaching AP for quite a while, the AP English language class. I was lucky enough to meet this guy, Jim, down in Daytona at an AP reading. I guess it was 12 summers ago. And since then, we became fast friends, and we've been working together and palling around as regularly as we can. We've even taken a number of road trips and have done some presentations about how to become better teacher, how we've become better teachers, and how to teach reading and writing across the curriculum. So it's been a pleasure, and we learning the things that we have over these years, we'd like to share.
And we're going to put up a little map here. Thanks, Dan. And it is nice working with you again, my friend. We have, as Dan said, been kind of a team for about 12 years, just because they seated us next to each other at the AP reading in 2009. But over time, one of the things we've figured out, and as we've gotten into consulting too, is that it really helps us to work together, that we're from two completely different communities. Dan is from, as he said, Riverside Brookfield, which is a public high school in a Chicago suburb. I teach at a Catholic school right in the heart of downtown San Francisco called Sacred Heart Cathedral Prep. So our student populations represent a pretty good diversity of learners. And so, when we're consulting, it's really important, and it helps us to keep in mind all the time that there's no one best way to teach anything. Until the rule number one of rhetoric, right, is consider the room, read your audience. So any strategies that we share with you over the next hour or so, keep in mind that they might work really well with your student population. They might work differently with others. And we try to keep that in mind as we share these ideas too. So Dan, it'll be really fun to work with you tonight. First thing we need to do is practice what we preach. So in the spirit of reading the room, I am opening a poll, and we're trying to get a sense of how many people on this webcast are English teachers and how many teach different subjects, because what we're going to talk about tonight is the cross-curricular value of rhetorical reading and writing. So I can see, I don't know if I'm able to share the results of the poll or if you can see it, but it is primarily English teachers. Can you see this, Dan?
I cannot see the results, but
so we've got a couple of administrators, humanities teacher. I know we have at least one writer. Welcome, Jennifer Fletcher. Nice to have you here. And, but it is predominantly English teachers. So that really helps us, because we want to show you the cross-curricular applications of what it is that we teach in our classes. And if you're a humanities or a STEM teacher, we'll show you how some of the things we do in this class can help there too. I don't know why the arrow just went. I guess it misses you, Christy. It went right to
I was actually trying to put it at Daytona, but
I went to Miami. All right. So onward and upward. Our topic this evening is one you may be familiar with: teaching for transfer, which is simply about teaching our students rhetorical reading and writing strategies that they can then transfer to other areas of their education and their lives.
Great. So I thought we'd start with a quote from Jennifer Fletcher, who is the author of Teaching Arguments, which is just a fantastic text to use it's a teacher text to use in your classroom. But it says, because teenagers largely write in rhetorical situations superficially characterized by due dates, predetermined rubrics, and teacher-assigned grades, they can have difficulty imagining less predictable conditions. So, we're going to start off with a warning about academic writing and the contrived nature of the rhetorical situation. That said, we're going to share strategies that that transfer not only across the curriculum, that is, remain within the confines of academic writing, but transfer across the curriculum and help us all become better teachers, but also transfer to real life natural writing opportunities.
And at some point during this webcast, I'll put a link to the website you can use to purchase the book if you want. If you don't have this book and you teach writing, you need this book. It's probably the single best it's the playbook for teaching rhetoric. So Jennifer, I mentioned, is with us for a little while tonight, at least. So it's nice to have you here. If you teach fiction and you're interested in applying rhetorical strategies to that, then her other book, Teaching Literature Rhetorically is excellent as well. We want to recommend both of those. So we'll be quoting Jennifer again tonight, but let's move on to, for the moment, another one of our favorite college rhetoric teachers, John Warner. And this is a book called The Writer's Practice, which is a collection of 33, I think, writing problems. He doesn't call them assignments, he calls them problems because, as Jennifer says in her book, the issue with rubrics and deadlines and sort of contrived rhetorical situations is that not that it harms students to do those things, it's that it sometimes helps them, it prohibits them from imagining larger rhetorical situations. So John Warner's advice is to try to create writing problems. And the real key to success is helping them learn how to write for an audience that isn't just me, the teacher. So when he says writing is thinking is not confined to a single subject, that's one way to help them broaden their view of their audience. It's merely a matter of considering the kind of thinking we want them to practice in different disciplines. That's what we're going to look at tonight. And then designing the experiences around them, that's the challenge. And one of the keys to it is making sure that the audience isn't always just me, the teacher. So we're going to talk about transferable writing, teaching for transfer. We're really focusing on primarily on writing. We're going to get into rhetorical reading too, but the two big skills students need, or habits that students need to do this well, are learning to read like a writer and then learning to make audience-focused rhetorical choices.
Great. So, I'll talk a little bit about Aristotle's rhetorical triangle, just because most of us are familiar with the concept. But the idea that the speaker, the audience, and the subject are all interrelated is an important idea. And that the audience is part of that idea that needs to be analyzed by the reader. In other words, we don't want to be we want to teach our students to be not readers as audience, but we want them to be detached from the audience as objective observers. This plays into the writing as well, but go ahead, Jim.
So this idea that the careful consideration of audience and context, we do want to broaden that idea. As Dan mentioned, the tricky part when you're doing analysis, of course, is detaching yourself from the role of being the actual audience. That's a tricky one for students. So this is a concept. Those of you that teach AP courses are certainly familiar with what we're looking at here. The College Board released new course and exam descriptions for every single subject, every single AP subject a year ago. And in these binders, digital or otherwise, it's a one-stop shopping place for all the resources you need to plan and teach these courses. Dan and I have been doing an exploration ever since these came out of all of these, looking for places that rhetoric, particularly rhetorical reading skill, but analysis and argument are necessary for student success in different disciplines. And we're going to take a little walk through some of these CEDs with you, just as an introduction to the strategies we want to share with you later on tonight. So we'll start with our course page. Go ahead, Dan. You take this.
Good. Yeah. So a good place to start, obviously, is with the AP Language course framework, and I believe we shared this with you as a resource. Most of us, well, if you're an AP English language teacher, you're familiar with it. But some of you out there are not. So I'm just going to walk you through it a little bit.
It's there, Dan.
It is. Okay. So what I want to talk about is these skills that we want to teach kids in the AP language classroom are skills that need to be taught in all disciplines. And we can see it in the language, which we're going to show you in just a few minutes, in really all the course and exam descriptions across the curriculum for AP. So if we look at I'm going to have us look at, my arrow's not working. I'm going to have us look at this row here. And I'm going to start over here with the rhetorical situation. And I'm not going to be able to read that because it's too small. But this is about how writers make decisions and choices based on the rhetorical situation. Here, this particular skill number 3, is about claims and evidence, how writers make claims and evidence, and how they use reasoning and organization here. And finally, how they make stylistic choices based on the rhetorical situation or based on their purpose. They make stylistic choices in order to achieve a purpose. So these are reading skills that I just put arrows next to. Next to each reading skill is a mirrored writing skill. So these two, so the two skills here, 1 and 2, they're kind of two peas in a pod, as are 3 and 4, as are 5 and 6, and as are 7 and 8. So the first one is going to be reading, and the second one is it's mirror writing skills. So that's what I wanted to walk you through a little bit. And the language that we see in here about claims and evidence, about while making defensible claims and understanding reasoning and lines of reasoning, we're going to see echo throughout the entire AP curriculum.
And many of you have seen this document before, I'm sure, but if you haven't, it's the first handout, I think, in the list. So if you want to look more closely at this language, and Dan, yeah, sorry, that's not the best image. It's my fault. But notice the pattern, as Dan said. They always, in each one of these categories, reading comes first. So we start with reading and pivot to writing each time. And here's why that's important. What we're going to walk through as we look at some of these other courses is the recurrence of analysis and argument. These two types of writing, we're going to make the case that the two most common forms of essays that students will be asked to write in all disciplines in college fall into these two categories. And we pivot from reading to writing in the course skills page. One of the things we like about that is that the universal academic definition of analysis is actually a form of reading. That's what it is. So examining the elements or structure of something, it's that detached way of reading that Dan mentioned earlier, not as the audience, but reading the rhetorical situation. So it's more like reading the room or reading a facial expression or reading the defense. It's a different kind of reading than simply reading for meaning. And then argument is this course's way of dealing with writing, articulating a position supported by a line of reasoning. And we're going to see that language a lot too. So that pivot from reading to writing, it really is assessed directly on the exam in the analytical tasks and the argumentation tasks. And as you know, on the AP exam, there's also the synthesis essay, which sort of blends both. So, and now we have multiple choice questions in AP language. And I don't know if, I know that most of this crowd is English teachers. I don't know how many of you teach lit or how many teach lang, but the new multiple choice section of the AP language exam involves learning. They get assessed on how well they can learn to think like a writer with those composition questions. So it really does come down to reading and writing, analysis and argument. And now, Dan, are you ready to take a little stroll through the CED collection?
I'm ready.
Right. So let's start with art historical thinking skills. These are pages directly from the CED for AP art history. And one of the first things you'll notice is that we see analysis across the top. Look, analysis. Oh, I don't have my arrow on. Hold on. Here's analysis here. Here's analysis here. But when you look over here, argumentation, we get a closer look on the right side of the page at how what skills students need in AP art history: articulate a defensible claim, use specific and relevant evidence, explain how the evidence justifies the claim. That could come right from page 19 of the AP Lang CED. So in art history, students need rhetoric to succeed. On the exam, if you look over on the left here, we have, these are the task verbs. So we have explain, identify, justify, attribution. These, again, come right from AP Lang. And then one of the essays requires them to produce an analysis. So in art history, analytical thinking it's required, regardless of your ability, your skill with art or your historical knowledge. Analysis is a task that is directly assessed.
Okay, so let's talk about sciences. The sciences, or STEM classes, including sciences, talk about skills as practices. Let's take a look at the practice 3 or skill 3. What does that say? Text analysis. That's right out of our playbook. What about practice 5? That's data analysis. Again, being an objective observer, where we need to analyze information, right, and then draw a conclusion. If you look closely, a little more closely, so now I'm just gonna, this here, oops, I can't do this, can I? I'm over here in this column on the right here. If you look more closely at the language underneath practice 3, you're going to see language right off of our very own course framework. Identify an author's claim, describe the author's perspective and assumptions, describe the author's reasoning, that is use of evidence to support a claim, etc. So you get the idea. These skills that we teach in our classroom are crucial, critical in science classes as well.
And let's take a look at what happens on the exam, Dan.
Great. So on the exam, if you look at these task verbs, calculate, describe, explain, identify, justify, again, they come right off of our own, that is AP Languages course framework. And check this out. Look at the free response questions. 2 of the 3 free response questions ask the same question about different things, of course, but it is analyze an environmental problem and propose a solution. Again, analysis and then making an argument, staking a claim. And
time permitting tonight, we have an example of a science exam response in which a student who had better command of the science actually had scored lower than a student who, without as much command of the science, had a better grip on rhetoric. And so it is a required skill. Students are being assessed on their analytical reading and their argumentation in just about every discipline. And keep in mind too, that we're not just trying to sell AP here. I mean, AP courses are designed in tandem and assessed. The exams are assessed by college and high school faculty. And every year, college professors contribute to the curriculum. So we know that what's being assessed on these exams reflects what's happening in college classrooms and what's required for success.
And wait, real quick before you start this, Jim, I'm just going to give a real life example of
let me back up
myself. Oh yeah, sorry. So I had the opportunity to team teach with an AP environmental science teacher a few years back, and we actually teamed for 2 years, and we kept lots of statistics. And what I did is I adopted the content from AP environmental science, and I was able to help his students, which were my students too, attack those free response questions more, strategically, using the skills from our class. And both the students' performances on the AP exams for both APES and AP Language were outstanding. And so, just reinforcing the skills that just that whole reinforcement of the rhetorical reading and writing skills are critical for success for students.
So pairing up actually yielded better results for students in both classes and both subjects.
That's right, both subjects.
That is really cool. I remember that now. Sorry that I jumped out before you.
No, that's okay.
So we can move a little faster now that you know how this works. Now we're going into AP Stats, even in math. We're moving from science to math. Now here we go again. Same pattern: data analysis, statistical argumentation. Those same 2 skills, really important. And I see in the chat somebody saying we knew. It's tempting to think, yeah, you can pair an English class with another humanities class. You see that a lot, but the truth is, I mean, I actually did a unit. Dan did an entire year of team teaching with an AP environmental science teacher, and it worked well. I paired my class up, my AP Lang class, with a stats class, an AP stats class a few years ago, just for 1 unit. And they had they had a terrific experience. The students in both classes found that they could learn from each other skills that helped them both in the class. But, I didn't have the same tracking on the exam that Dan did because it was only 1 unit. So it's hard to say, but there's absolutely potential for crossover, even in STEM. Here we go again on the stats, in the stats skills pages, the course skills, we've got data analysis, statistical argumentation. And then on the exam, all these task verbs, you know the drill now over on the left side, those could come right off page 19 in our CED. But then look at the exam, what they're required to do. They have analysis and statistical argumentation in the multiple choice and the essay section in AP Stats. So these students are being assessed on their rhetorical skill in math and science too.
Great. And then, so if we look at historical, the history classes, historical thinking, again, you're going to see the same, we're going to draw the same conclusion. Claims and evidence in sources, that's material right from the AP English language course framework. With contextualization too, you can think of as rhetorical situation. And then of course, argumentation. So we can go right to the exam page and task verbs next, Jim. Good. And the task verbs you see: compare, define, describe, develop an argument, draw a conclusion. This is all rhetoric, as is, if we look at the test itself, the free response question 2, an argument essay. Are you kidding me? So this is exactly what we teach in our AP language class.
Anybody take a look lately at the rubric for AP Lang for any of the 3 essays, row A? Doesn't it look a lot like that? So, by the way, before we wrap this up with world languages,
well, like that, Jim.
there it is again, right? I mean, a lot of this stuff comes right from our curriculum and our rubrics. You know, here's a fun tip: share this with your students. They actually won't be bothered by it. They love it when you can show them how what you're teaching them actually is immediately applicable to their other courses. It is. Well, it also, they view it as me doing them a favor when I point this out, because I'm trying to help them connect the dots. And it's the College Board is actually doing this for us. These CEDs are not designed this way by accident. So we look at again, the core skills for world languages. We picked Latin because it's just fun, but now in all of the world languages, students aren't just being asked to focus on vocabulary or simple translation. There's actually critical thinking assessed. You can see that textual analysis and argumentation are skills that are going to be assessed on. And on the exam, the analytical essay asks them to, here we go again, articulate a defensible claim or thesis, analyze the effects of language, support the argument. This is all stuff that could come directly from the AP Lang course. So it's everywhere. Dan and I did a cursory count at one point, and at that point, I think there were 38 AP courses, and I want to say in 28 or 29 of them, rhetorical skill was required for success on the exam. That is still true. And these CEDs, they're all public documents in AP Central and now in AP Classroom. So it's a fun thing to explore, but it's an even more enjoyable thing to share with your students once you start to figure these out. And we want to encourage you to look for opportunities to partner up with people in your, not just in your department at school, but in other buildings too. So what do we do with all this, Dan?
Well, here's our rhetorical situation. This is the enduring understanding we are supposed to teach our kids to walk away with. And that is that individuals write within a particular situation and make strategic writing choices based on that situation.
And this is now an echo to the quote we showed you from Jennifer Fletcher at the beginning of the night, when in the beginning of her book, she tells us that students have trouble imagining any other situation because they get so locked in on writing for rubrics that we get questions now like, how do I get the sophistication point, right? Which is, obviously that's transactional thinking. It's and it's not about chasing points. The solution is to create opportunities for students to practice rhetorical reading and then argumentation. And we're going to take you through over the next half hour or so 2 of our favorite rhetorical strategies for helping students in any discipline sharpen their skills in both rhetorical reading and argumentation. So that's the transferable skill part. Go ahead, Dan.
Well, great. And, I want to say maybe this would be a good time maybe to check the chat box for questions that we can address before we get into our 2 strategies. So
I'm not seeing any questions right now, Dan. A lot of traffic in the chat, and we're getting some good advice too from this is great. I see this is being well received too. This is great. Thank you. One of the things I did see in the chat that I want to point out, I think it's just kind of a happy accident, but somebody pointed out that one of the handouts, it says Lang advice, and it's actually a link to a piece that I'm going to talk about from the John Lang. He's
funny. Yeah.
Professor. It's John Lang's advice
right
on the 5-paragraph essay, and I think it just got mislabeled, but it's there twice. So sorry about that. It's called Unlearning the 5-Paragraph Essay, and I want to be very careful before I say that right now because the 5-paragraph essay is a polarizing topic, and I'm not here to beat up on it. So I'm sharing that in context later. But anyway, that was just a titling mistake. So it's just because his name is John Lang and the course happens to be AP Lang. If you've ever been to the AP reading, I'm sure you know the man. He's a professor at Berkeley, and he's part of the leadership of the AP Lang reading too, Very, very sharp guy. So anyway, back to our regularly scheduled programming, Dr. O'Rourke.
One of those way smart guys.
This is one of the first takeaways that I think we need to help our students see, because they do tend to think about writing as this daunting task, and then they'll come up with ways to simplify it, and oftentimes they will lean on structures, formulaic structures like the 5-paragraph essay. The truth is, in an argument, there's really only one non-negotiable. It's got to be a series of claims and evidence in a convincing pattern, a line of reasoning. That's it. When we simplify it down to its two most basic elements, it comes down to AP Lang big idea number 2, claims and evidence. Is that number 2? It is.
It is.
So my favorite way to help students see this is by showing them the published essays that come out every single day. You can get them online for free usually, although it's nice if you subscribe to a local newspaper. But op-ed columnists write essay length arguments every single day on every topic you can think of. And they're a very nice example of how to think about essay writing without locking it into the 5-paragraph formula. You can even take an op-ed column and repackage it as a 5-paragraph argument if you want to. But the truth is, all of these things that are bulleted here are rhetorical choices, all of them. And every rhetorical choice, as we know, rule number 1 of rhetoric, is driven by careful consideration of the audience. So the more varied audiences you can build into your assignments, the more you're going to help students break free of those contrived rhetorical situations that Jennifer Fletcher talks about. The number of paragraphs, it's a rhetorical choice. In an op-ed column, sometimes they're broken down by line. I like my students to see that essentially their visual paragraph breaks are a visual rhetorical choice. If you're listening to a speech, you can't hear the paragraph breaks. They're designed to give your eyes a break. Sometimes they do signal a transition, but there are no real rules about paragraphs. This is a mind-blowing concept for students. John Warner, in another book that he's got called Why They Can't Write, which is another terrific book, says that, when he was teaching freshman comp, I think I don't know if it was at Virginia Tech, but he would, on the first day, he would have his students go up to the whiteboard and list everything they knew about writing. And most of what they put on the wall was prohibitions. You can't use I, or it has to be this many words, this many paragraphs, this many, all these rules that are not really rules. They are rules that we create for them as teachers. There are reasons we do it. But the more we can get away from having ourselves be the audience, and I know that's not easy when you have 150 papers to grade, but the more we can set these up as what Warner calls writing problems, the better, which, they've been taught they can't say I. Well, they can. You can use I in an essay. It's often a very poor rhetorical choice, but I want my students to understand why. When I use I in my central claim, I'm pretty much locking myself into a credibility appeal. Trust me. Why would I want to do that if I'm talking about Shakespeare, unless I'm a Shakespearean actor? And even then, I'm only 17, right? So they can do it. It's legal. It's just not always a good rhetorical choice. And you get the drill. That's how this works. So op-eds do provide a strong model. And I'm going to come back to the op-ed concept in a bit. Dan, why don't you? Here we go. I could have toggled this before. These are the 2 John Warner books again. Why don't I let you take this, Dan?
Yeah, we're going to. But I'm getting a little interference. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, we hear you.
Okay. So John Warner basically talks, it really echoes what Jennifer Fletcher said on the first slide. And that is that often what we teach in high school in our writing classes is what he calls a distortion of what it means to write. He calls it imitations of writing because of the contrived rhetorical situation. And we want to, it's okay to teach in those contrived prompts. When we offer writing prompts for our students, that's okay. But what we want them to do is learn the skills that transfer into more natural writing. All right. So, and Jim and I are going to try to talk about 2 really helpful strategies that do just that.
Yeah. So Dan's going to start with, and many of you may know some of these strategies. They're certainly these are in Jennifer Fletcher's book. They're also in Larry Scanlon and Renee Shea's book, The Language of Composition. You're going to find these 2 in Everything's an Argument. Almost any rhetoric text is going to cover Toulmin, and stasis theory. So Dan's going to take us through a couple of accessible activities for teaching kids how to internalize Toulmin. And then I'm going to show you how I use stasis theory to help students break free from any of the restraints of their good old friend, the 5-paragraph essay.
And because we want to give you guys time at the end, we're going to really rush. We're going to rush through this. So I'm going to talk about a relatively complex idea. And I'm just going to introduce you to it, and I'm going to kind of breeze through it, hopefully to show you that this is definitely a tool you want to adopt. Even if you don't fully comprehend it right now, this is definitely a tool you want to adopt. But let's go back to our course framework. Let's go back to our course framework. The rhetorical situation is the first big idea. Style is the last big idea. The two middle ones are logic. Claims and evidence, reasoning, organization. Let's just call it logic, what it is. What it is. So look at teaching logic. You can't get around it if you're teaching writing, because writing is thinking. Often we think of logic. We think of logic through the classical lens of induction and deduction. Scientific method. I'm going to make a bunch of observations about details, and I'm going to draw a conclusion inductively. The Deer Hunter won Best Picture. It's a great movie. Departed won Best Picture. Great movie. Silence of the Lambs is a great movie. Therefore, all films that win Best Picture are great movies. That's a nice logical conclusion to specific evidence. That's induction, right? Or deduction. All right, let's just start with the broad. All films that win Best Picture are great movies, right? That was our broad conclusion last time. Let's start there. Parasite won Academy Award for Best Picture. Therefore, Parasite is a great movie. All right, these are induction and deduction, and a better way to think about logic is, instead of thinking about these two clunky patterns of logic, we should introduce Toulmin. Toulmin, shape of argument. We want to introduce Toulmin into our writing and, to be honest, reading classes as well. Okay, let's go to the next slide.
Sorry, I was trying to fix something at one of the
Oh, that's okay. And again, I'm going to go through this fast. Try to sharpen your brains right now. I know it's late, but just try to follow along with me. So Toulmin found that all arguments follow one standard handy pattern, just one. That's so easy. That's so easy to teach. Toulmin observed that real-world arguments are not typically expressed in this clunky manner of induction and deduction, right? They follow one standard handy pattern, right? And it starts with a claim, and we're going to attach evidence to it. I guess you guys can see my illustration here. You got the claim, you have evidence, which is data, and then you have the warrant. So we're going to talk about warrant. Let's go to the next slide.
I think, there we go.
Oh, do I do it? Can I do it?
You can, but I'm happy to, you know what, Dan, I'm here for you.
I didn't know I had the power.
Can I get you a cup of coffee or anything?
Yeah, right.
Something stronger.
So, okay, anyhow, Toulmin model. And let me just make sure. Did I miss one? I did. So the Toulmin model focuses on identifying the basic parts of the argument, which is claim, data, and warrant. Those are the three basic parts of every single argument. And every single argument has these three basic parts. So helping kids identify this is our first step. Toulmin says that a reason or a piece of evidence data is only as strong as the warrant upon which it rests, right? So there's no such thing, evidence can't be strong or weak by itself. It all depends on the warrant, the link from the evidence to the claim. So that's Toulmin's big reveal. All right, so I am gonna go to our next slide and say this. I want you to understand how Toulmin is the way to teach. It's the way to teach logic. All right. So I'm going to walk you through that clunky syllogism again. Major premise: all movies that win Best Picture are great movies. Minor premise: Parasite won Academy Award for Best Picture. Therefore, Parasite is a great movie. Okay. Nobody talks like that. How we talk, real world arguments. What do we say? We say, Parasite won, great movie. I'm sorry, I can't even talk. Sorry. We don't talk like that. No, we say Parasite is a great movie. It won won Academy Award for Best Picture, didn't it? So this is how we argue. This is more natural. And what Toulmin what Toulmin found was that this is technically a syllogism, an enthymeme. It's an incomplete syllogism where the major premise is understood. All right. Well, that's a lot. Toulmin just said it's a claim with a reason attached to it. Here it is. Parasite is a great movie because it won Academy Award for Best Picture. You got your claim, you have your reason, done. But evidence is only as strong as the warrant upon which it rests. What is the warrant? Well, it's just an assumption. It's understood. It's not expressed. But really, it's that all movies that win Best Picture are great movies. You can look at the bullet points down here, but is that incontrovertible? Can that be challenged? And of course, the answer is yes. And so maybe this isn't as strong of an argument as what it might first appear. So this is analysis. This is using Toulmin for analysis. Okay. Wait, I got the power. Thank you.
I can feel it.
So Toulmin it looks like it gets way complicated, but it doesn't. It's really, again, just the claim, just the evidence. Oh boy. And just the warrant. It's supposed to be evidence. I'm not drawing too good. Data evidence. Okay. So, but then we can add three, or I shouldn't even say we're not adding anything. Toulmin recognizes that there might be other elements involved in an argument. And he incorporated those other elements, which might be involved in an argument, in his handy pattern. And that would be backing, the qualifier, and the rebuttal. So we'll talk a little bit about those. Once students understand, once students understand the first three, we're gonna move them to understand some of the other elements that might be present. So here's the next slide. The warrant here, we want to keep in mind. Remember what Jim said. There's really just claims and evidence. That's it. All right. In writing, there's only claims and evidence. That's what writing is. You got your claim, you got your data, right? Your data is evidence by nature, which might be a claim all its own, but we'll get into that later. The warrant is definitely a claim. The warrant is a broad claim. Remember, it was the major premise in the syllogism a second ago. The warrant is a general claim. That's what it is. And sometimes the audience will accept the warrant readily, a friendly audience, or sometimes the audience might reject this claim, not accept the claim at face value. So me, as a writer, might have to think, you know what? I have to provide more backing to convince my hostile audience that that claim is true, so that this piece of evidence bears on the truth of my ultimate claim, which is my big argument. So I'm making a big argument, but within my big argument, my central claim, I have to make a baby argument. And in that little baby argument, I have to prove the true, I don't want to say truth. I have to convince my audience to accept, the truth of the warrant claim.
Now, I'm going to show you another way to think about that baby argument in a few minutes. I love that you said that. It's the best.
All right. It's just a little argument within the bigger one.
I know it.
So, all right. Well, I'm going to just give you an example that I think most of us know, and I'm going to peek at the clock. Okay. So here is an example.
You're all right.
I'm going to walk us through. I'm going to walk Toulmin. I'm going to walk us through Toulmin using the example of 12 Angry Men. Right. So 12 Angry Men, I have a claim. I'm the prosecutor. And my claim is the accused boy is guilty of murdering his father. All right, so I want to prove that's my claim. I need a reason, right? Well, and my reason is, my evidence, my data is, because the woman across the street says so, right? So my claim is the accused boy is guilty of murdering his father. And the evidence is, the woman across the street says she saw him do it. Now, the jury, let's think about the jury. If the jury is friendly, the jury might accept this piece of evidence as true, meaning the jury might say, okay, yeah, the woman is a reliable eyewitness, right? So therefore, the evidence that she saw him do it, and she says she saw him do it, is a clincher, and this boy is in big trouble. But now, if the audience doesn't accept the truth of this claim, if the audience needs further nudging to believe this claim, which is the warrant, which makes the piece of evidence effective in supporting the main claim, then I need to nudge the audience in that direction. So how would I do it? I need to provide evidence for this warrant claim. Look at it. It's called backing. I'm providing evidence for this warrant claim. And, some evidence, you can look at the bottom, the bottom of this page here, those might serve as pieces of evidence to support that warrant claim, to nudge the jury in the direction of accepting that warrant claim as true. All right, so now let's take a quick look at the last two parts of Toulmin, right? So the last two parts, we're going to be qualifier and rebuttal. Let's look at the rebuttal first. A reservation, oftentimes when I'm making an argument, we want to teach our kids. We want to teach our kids to anticipate objections to the argument, whether that be an audience questioning an assumption or questioning a warrant that needs further backing, or perhaps raising a reservation, right? Which is an exception to your main claim. For instance, you may have to acknowledge that perhaps, the woman across the street has very poor eyesight. Right. So, is she a reliable eyewitness or not? Well, if she has poor eyesight, that calls into question her reliability as an eyewitness. So remember, when you raise a reservation, you must then offer a rebuttal that sufficiently outweighs the acknowledged counterargument. For instance, it's reasonable to think that because she has poor eyesight, the woman cannot be a reliable eyewitness. In fact, she was wearing her glasses with her glasses on. She was wearing her glasses, and with her glasses on, her vision is 20/20. You can see I'm straying from the plot of the play here, but I'm just trying to make a point. If you raise a reservation, which is a good idea, right? Because you're anticipating objections to your argument, then you can rebut them, hit them head on, and make a stronger argument. So finally, qualifier is the last one. Qualifier, we teach this already, for crying out loud. We always tell our kids, beware of absolutes, or however you guys want to say it in your classroom. But a statement that lessens the force of the claim is a qualifier. And it's a good idea to use qualifiers. For instance, the woman is most likely a reliable eyewitness. Look at that phrase, most likely, or probably a reliable eyewitness. I'm lessening the force of that claim, and I'm therefore making it easier to defend. Okay, so that's how Toulmin works. That's it. That's everything. Right? And I know that's a lot, but it's not too much. That is something your kids can grasp, and it could make them stronger writers because they're analyzing their own arguments, and stronger readers because they're analyzing others.
So, hey, Dan, there's a question in the Q&A section about commentary, which is one of the hallmarks of our, it's one of the big ideas, right? Evidence and commentary. So as you're about to move into this template, I think you're going to answer it automatically. But the question, where does commentary fit into the Toulmin model? Commentary is the warrant, period. I should say. And if we go back a second, I hate to go back because I know we have to move forward. Yeah, you're good. Just go the warrant could be one general claim that is enough commentary to get all 4 points on our rubric, for instance. However, sometimes the more sophisticated arguments extend the warrant to include backing because they're anticipating objections to the warrant. That's sophisticated thinking. And they're raising reservations about how maybe, that warrant might not always be true, but then they're offering a rebuttal. So that's
that Toolman is commentary. Toolman's everything you need.
Show us how this template works.
Okay, so here's a template, and you can find this in Language Composition. That's the Scanlon Shea teaching text. And it's a nice little tool. What you would do is, well, it's a template, and we would throw in the different parts of the argument in this particular place. It's fill in the blanks. Look, the evidence, data, claim, warrant, assumption, backing, and reservation. And we would put those, we would couple those parts of the argument with these, let's call them, I like to call them coherence connectors, or what, sentence framers or sentence starters, because, therefore, since, on account of, and unless, they're triggers that help kids think more thoroughly about what it is they're reasoning. So let's go to the next slide. Here, like in our argument, for instance, we're trying to say the boy's guilty of murdering his father. That's the claim. So we're going to say therefore. All right, but we're going to start with because, which is the reason. Well, I shouldn't say reason, which is the evidence or data. Because the woman across the street said the boy is guilty of murder, because the woman said so, therefore the boy is guilty of murder. Since what? Since the warrant. This is the all-important warrant. Since the woman across the street is a reliable eyewitness. Again, if the audience already believes that, you're done. Argument's over. You win. However, if the jury doesn't accept that, it needs further nudging on account of the fact that the woman was both awake and alert at the time of killing, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Here's some further evidence now for the warrant claim, because everything's evidence and claims, guys. Everything is claims and evidence. And then here would be the reservation, unless the woman had very poor eyesight. But don't forget, we got to offer a rebuttal for that.
All right, you're getting exhausted. You are so excited. You're wearing yourself out. I'm going to give you a little break, Dan. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
We're going to pivot to we'll save this Toolman for other subjects for if we have time. But we can share some of that with you too later, even afterwards, if you like. So I call stasis theory the key to effective argumentation, and I can do this pretty quickly because I do want to save a little time at the end. I call this the tool for removing the training wheels. Sometimes I think we focus on the wrong Athenian. You know, there are a lot of statues of Aristotle and Socrates and Plato, and it's hard to find one of Hermagoras of Temnos. He was a contemporary of Aristotle, and he came up with this idea that every argument has a stasis point, and we know stasis means conflict. So Hermagoras said, if you, and many readers have said this, if the speaker doesn't seek stasis from the get-go, the argument is destined to fail. You've got to find the point at issue, or the question at issue. So in Larry Scanlon and Renee Shea's book, they reduced this to 3 in the language of composition. I've seen it go as far as 6 or 7. This is the list, though, that I'm most comfortable with. Jennifer Fletcher has it in her book, Teaching Arguments, and it's in the chat here, that textret.com, which is a site I highly want to highly recommend. That's John Edlin's blog. He's got a module on stasis theory in there that you can download for free and use with your students to help them internalize this. Most textbooks do a really short treatment of this. There's a page on Purdue OWL. For years, I couldn't figure out exactly how to make this relevant to my students in an everyday way, until I figured out that the key is taking it beyond the lens Hermagoras used. He applied it to full arguments. When you use it at the claim level, it unlocks everything. We go back to that claims and evidence idea. So we know that stasis theory says there are 4 different possible questions at issue. The question of fact would be, if your claim is that climate change is real, that's most claims of fact manifest themselves as cause. The cause of this is, right? But anyway, so that would be just to say that something exists, or that it's real. A claim of definition would be to say that climate change is something we experience as extremes in weather conditions. Sometimes we have ice storms, sometimes we have warm water floods, those kinds of things. A quality claim or a value claim is a judgment. This is the biggest crisis of our time, or it's a good thing, a dangerous thing, a bad thing, you know the deal. And a policy claim, we see those a lot. That's the call to action. Often the most compelling of the 4 is the call to action. Keep that in mind. So here is the 5-paragraph formula that we all know so well. All right. And I love that I found this from I don't know what Clickademics is, but it's the perfect name for this, for my money. We know why this formula is so pervasive and why it exists. A blank page is terrifying for a student, and so is a stack of 120 essays for a teacher. So there's a reason that so many teachers and students at the high school level will embrace this concept. It's easier to score. We look for the thesis statement here, and if we don't find it there, we can move to the next one. I mean, especially at the AP reading, this is how it happens, right? We know where the 5-paragraph model came from. It's built on Aristotle's classical oration model. It's pretty hard to argue with that, of course. But here's the thing: Aristotle was dead and buried 1700 years before Gutenberg came along. And my guess, Dan, is that was probably one heck of a funeral, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely.
Got a good setup. Excuse me. Anyway, Aristotle could not possibly have been describing written arguments. So in his classical oration model, when he says that one of the most effective ways to conclude is to summarize what you've already said, that's a good rhetorical choice in a speech when the audience can't rewind. In an essay, my goodness, this idea of repeating your thesis statement here, and I don't even know, excuse me, referring back to the hook, I'm not sure what that would even look like in this model, but here's what I tell my students. If I want to reread your thesis statement, I'm going to go back to the top of the page and I'll reread it. Please don't force me to read it twice. This is unsophisticated. It's one way to prohibit yourself from earning that coveted sophistication point is to just repeat yourself. So the drawbacks to the 5-paragraph formula, while it does offer comfort to students and it does make it easier to score papers, and the rhythm of 3s is very nice. 3 pieces of evidence are certainly more convincing than 2. Here's the thing. If you write a 3-part thesis statement and then you say you take a position on the issue because A, B, and C, and then you start your body paragraphs with A, B, and C, you are already repeating yourself. And then to pivot at the end to this in conclusion or as previously stated, you're going to get yourself in trouble. It is the training wheels have to come off at some point. How does stasis theory help? Watch this. You can reduce any text to, instead of a 5-part thing, a 3-part thing, or even a 2-part thing. The narrower we can make that number, the better for me and for my students. Here's what you do. This is my list, by the way. Of course, I'm using stasis theory here, but I put rhetorical question on this list because I want my students to understand that rhetorical questions operate as claims. The writers employ rhetorical questions to sort of trick the audience, manipulate them into making the claim as if it was theirs, right? So I put that on my list because I'll give my students this list and I'll have them go through an op-ed and I will have them highlight every single sentence in either we'll use blue for claims and we'll use green for evidence. That's my school color, so that's what we do. So every line will get highlighted, and then I want them to identify the type of claim and the type of evidence. I came up with this list, and it's in one of the handouts, by the way. There's an activity that you can use. It's in the rhetorical reading templates handout. So you have that activity. And here's what ends up happening. They start to see the color pattern, and then they can start to look visually at the structure of arguments in a way that takes them beyond. I like to say it helps them use what they've learned about the 5-paragraph essay to move beyond it. I don't like to beat up on the 5-paragraph essay in my classroom because my students know it, and most of them learned it from a teacher they loved and trusted, and it comforted them. So if I come in and start beating up on it right away, my credibility is out the window. I want them to know that what they've learned in mastering that is helpful, but it's time, as John Warner says, to take the training wheels off, because what's the one skill you actually need to ride a bike, Dan?
I think they're having trouble hearing me.
Oh, well, it's balance. I can hear you.
Oh, okay.
Can you
give you a heads up? 5 minutes. So.
Oh yeah, that's great. I'm ready to. I'm going to wrap this up pretty quickly. So when you take the training wheel, with training wheels on a bicycle, that's the one thing that the child can't learn how to do is balance. The one skill they need. So the 5-paragraph essay is limiting. What I'll do is take this, by the way, if you look at this, you can't read it unless you speak Latin, but this is a typeset. It's a chunk of text from Cicero, actually, that typesetters use. You might have seen it when you're building slide decks. That lorem ipsum dolor sedam at the top there it's Latin. I give this to my students as a typical, just so they can see the shape and the organization of it. This is what an op-ed column typically looks like when you color the claims in blue and the evidence in green. we usually start with opening context, which is evidence, and then we have our central claim, which is usually a claim of either value, of fact, or of definition. Most op-ed writers will open with one of those three and build their line of reasoning. Usually it's an evaluation about a problem. And then they will build their line of reasoning using evidence and the other three types of claims. They save the policy claim for last. I mentioned earlier that syllogisms are a great way to think about writing a thesis statement. I think they are. If you take a syllogism, climate change is the biggest problem of our time, therefore we should reduce our carbon footprint. I don't want my students to throw that all out there at the end of paragraph 1. I want them to take that syllogism and use it as the bookends for their essay. The claim of value, climate change is the biggest problem of our time, is the one, that half, I'm going to have them build their line of reasoning around that half, blending claims and evidence. And then when they get to the end, I'm going to have them, basically the line of reasoning is the therefore, conclude with their call to action. So the thesis becomes the bookends for the essay. And even in the rubrics for the AP Lang exam, I know we're down to 2 minutes, you see that it doesn't say statement anywhere. I think we misinterpret the word thesis sometimes to mean thesis statement, which is limiting. By definition, thesis means your stance or position on the issue. In the rubric, it also says that the thesis can be more than one sentence. I would like to see them lose the in close proximity piece at some point, because the truth is we often will say, oh, an op-ed columnist always saves the thesis for the end. And that's a half truth. The thesis, there's always a central claim at the beginning around which the line of reasoning is built, but they save the more compelling piece of the syllogism, the policy claim, for last. And I just to show you, this is the 3 parts that you would see in an essay, but it looks the same here. Before we run out of time, I'm just going to show you this one. Here's the Latin one, right on the left. I mocked this up a week ago and gave it to my students just out of thin air to say, here's the baby argument. It's a sandwich right here. You see that we've got blue, green, and blue. There's always going to be a claim followed by some evidence and an explanation of how that evidence works in any of the body paragraphs in the line of reasoning. These are the little baby arguments. And then I took this and I compared it to a real op-ed that was published in the San Francisco Chronicle just this week. And you can't read it, but look at the color coding. It matches. The essay has all arguments are simply a blend of claims and evidence. I'm running us out of time. This was great. I don't know who to hand this off to, but thank you all very much for being here. We will.
We do have a couple of questions in the Q&A, Jim.
I don't know if we're going to get booted out of this thing.
Yeah, I'm not sure how this works.
Oh, I see.
So where does commentary? Okay, and then Dan's upcoming template. Oh no, okay.
2 new questions. If a student identifies before in an argument, even if it's one sentence, it will be allow the student to receive a 4 in row B. The key to receiving 3s and 4s in row B, and Dan, you can speak to this if you like. Obviously, it's line of reasoning. I think you know that, Karen, already. So. Do you see it, Dan? It's in the new.
If I'm understanding this correctly, if a student accurately identifies the warrant in an argument, even if it is one sentence, so if a warrant bears on the truth of the claim, it follows a line of reasoning, and it will earn therefore will earn the points that it needs to do. So if a student can warrant the evidence consistently throughout his paper, yes, he will get his 4.
I recommend you use the word warrant in your feedback to students, even if it's criticism. This evidence is unwarranted. Can you warrant? Sometimes I'll even say that this is nicely warranted. I try to turn it into a verb.
Now that said, it is always, like I said, a good idea to help them reason through that warrant and extend that warrant. So, because quite frankly, it's not that much to get the 141 rather than the 140. And and
then the second question is about all 4 claims. I mean, I think it does help. The claim of definition, you'll see it. The thing is, the other thing you'll learn, and I know we're out of time, is that sometimes there's a gray area, and some claims actually fit into more than one of those categories. And it doesn't matter if they wrestle with that. I think it's really important. I like to challenge. I'll come up with one. I'll say, oh, this one is a claim of fact, and a student might ask, well, isn't it evidence? And then I'll say, well, they're trying to employ it as evidence in this op-ed, but you tell me that if the fact that you're not sure it is evidence means it's probably not that effective, is it? Is it? And then we'll have these great conversations around it. So it's never going to be black and white. It's going to be green and blue.
And also, I'll say, Jim mentioned Scale and Shea book where they do 3. The definition claim is actually part of the claim of fact. So they just do the 3. Anyhow, do they need to know 4 claims? I don't know about need, but it's helpful.
I've never seen them tested on it, but it does help them.
Oh, no, yeah, would be, yeah.
It helps them with sophistication if they can understand how to employ all 4 types of claims in service of one argument. But the key is to save your most compelling claim for your conclusion. And that is that's a game changer. You notice if you've ever been at the AP reading, you've seen this. When you read it, essay after essay that just has a kind of a redundant conclusion or a contrived conclusion, and then suddenly you come across one that offers this new, bolder claim, new stasis category, but same stance, those essays really soar. That's a sophisticated stylistic choice. And once you learn this, you can't unsee it. It's a threshold concept. Right. I see it in every op-ed I ever read now.
And I was just going to say, I think a good way to end this would simply be these are skills, obviously, we're talking about the test, and they help the kids score higher on the test and earn the points they need to earn on those rubrics. But more importantly, they help the kids think more logically, and they're able to construct arguments that transfer into the real world.
So we can, Dan and I can stick around and answer any other questions.
Oh yeah. I didn't know. I thought we were going to get caught off at 3:30.
I think this is there we go. That was our last. So now you'll have our email addresses too, if any of you want to follow up and ask anything more specific, but we can share other resources too, if you're really interested in this. For years now, since Dan and I have been doing workshops too for the College Board, he really fell in love with, I did too, with Toulmin a few years ago. And that's one of the ways I've embraced it. But Toulmin's kind of Dan's thing at his workshop. And then my workshops, I spend a lot of time using stasis theory because they're both really helpful lenses, and they really do help students with both argumentation and analytical skill. So, they're great practices. And I think they are oftentimes underutilized because teachers are not really sure how to make them relevant and applicable and accessible, because they're theory. These activities, if you want to get into that rhetorical reading templates document, I can share more of those things with you if you like. But Jennifer Fletcher's book has all of these templates in the back for this stuff too. Get that book.
And the payoff with both of these theoretical concepts is not immediate with the students. You have to be patient. You're going to introduce Toulmin and let it spiral throughout the rest of the year. You're going to introduce, and they really dovetail. The stasis theory really is part of Toulmin, and Toulmin is part of stasis theory because it's all about claims and evidence. So, it'll help you become a better teacher and your students to become more profound learners.
I don't see anything else in the Q&A. Listen, we are grateful for the opportunity to do this. So we want to thank John. We want to thank Christy. We want to thank Marco Learning, everybody who took the time to tune in and listen to a couple of knuckleheads like Dan and me. Thank you very much.
Thanks. Thank you.
Your students are really lucky to have you. The fact that you're taking the time to do this, we're grateful.
Right. And I guess I'll end by saying this. Remember, you're your students' best resource. So take care of yourself.
What a nice sentiment, Danny. I like it.
And happy Thanksgiving.
That is such a nice sentiment. That is so nice. Thank you guys. You guys are awesome.
Thank you.
I think